Active shoulder extension. I ask the client to reach their arms into the air with their palms facing inwards. This gives us an indication as to how far the client feels comfortable to move at the joint. This is also testing active range of movement, but for shoulder flexion. I ask the client to reach backwards to the wall behind them, keeping their palms facing each other. For active abduction, I ask the client to reach their arms in a circular movement in order to meet each other at the top. Similarly, for active adduction of the shoulder, I ask them to move one arm across the midline of their body whilst maintaining contact between the back of their arm and their stomach, and I ask them to repeat this on both arms. Active external and internal rotation of the shoulder. I ask them to get their hand to move away from the midline for external and across the midline for internal, ensuring their elbow is locked to their side. This is active testing of a combination of internal rotation and adduction. This is a useful test for someone who has a large range of movement, as it allows us to see the full capacity of these actions at the joint. For active abduction, I ask them to move their arm as far back as they can, and for active adduction to bring their arm across their body, all whilst keeping their arms straight and shoulders forward. For active elevation, I ask them to bring their shoulders up to their ears, and for active depression to push their fingertips down to the floor. For active testing of protraction, I ask the client to round their shoulders inwards, and for active retraction to squeeze their shoulder blades together. Testing passive range of movement for shoulder extension and flexion. This allows me to assess the end feel of the joint, meaning any weaknesses of connective tissue such as tendons and ligaments, which restricts movements, can be identified and used as an explanation for poor range of movement. Here I am testing passive abduction of the shoulder by bringing the arm up and away from the midline of the body to above the head. For passive adduction, I bring the arm across the midline of the body, ensuring their arm keeps in contact with their torso, allowing me to assess the end feel. For passive horizontal adduction, I bring the client's arm across the midline of their body, and for horizontal abduction, I bring their arm away from the midline of the body. For both, I make sure that the client's arm remains straight and that their shoulders do not rotate. Here I am testing passive external rotation by securing the elbow and bringing their arm away from their body, and for passive internal rotation, I secure their elbow and bring their arm across their body. This is passive testing of the combined movement for internal rotation and adduction at the shoulder joint. Here is another method of testing passive internal and external rotation of the shoulder. Now is resisted isotonic shoulder extension. Resisted testing requires an external force to be applied to the joint. Isotonic means that the muscles change length whilst contracting in order to resist the force I'm applying in the opposite direction. The client pulls their arm up towards their ears while I apply force down to the ground. This is also testing resisted isotonic movement, but for shoulder flexion. The client pushes their arm back towards me to counteract the force I'm applying in the other direction. This is resisted testing of shoulder abduction. The client pushes upwards to get their arm to the ear while I resist and apply downward force. This is to test the strength of the movement, and therefore it can help identify limitations to bony structures or connective tissues. Similarly, for resisted testing of shoulder adduction, I apply force to the arm away from the midline while they apply force towards the midline of the body. For horizontal abduction, I push the arm away from the midline while the client resists the force I'm applying and pushes towards the midline of the body. For horizontal adduction, I push the arm towards the midline of the body, whilst the client resists the force I'm applying and pushes away from the midline of the body. This is resisted rotation. For external rotation, the client pushes their arm away from the midline, and for internal rotation, the client pushes their arm towards the midline. Here is resisted elevation of the shoulders. For this, I ask the client to push up and try and get their shoulders to meet their ears. Meanwhile, I apply resisted elevation of the shoulders. For this, I ask the client to push up and try and get their shoulders to meet their ears. Meanwhile, I apply downwards force that they must resist. Similarly, for depression, I apply an upwards force and the client must apply a downwards force to resist me. For resisted protraction of the shoulders, the client rounds their shoulders while I apply force to try and push their shoulders back. Finally, for retraction, I push their shoulders forwards while they resist me by squeezing their shoulder blades together.